That wasn't very good. Try it again. Good morning. Oh, that's better. That's much better. Oh, it's nice to see a nice big crowd for our season kickoff this morning. So you all came to learn about worms, right? No? Okay. Well, we'll find out in a minute what we're going to learn about here if you don't already know. Our next 2 weeks from today, our speaker will be Stuart Hadley, Associate Vice President of ASU, and I have to look at my paper. Deputy Chief of Staff. I knew there was something that sounds like somebody who knows something, right? Anyway, Stuart will be talking to us about the future of ASU and what they have on the drawing boards over there. So I think it'll be an interesting program. And now to introduce this morning's speaker, Dick Bryce.
All right, now I've got a question for everybody. What happened 1:45 a.m. this morning? More important. Thank you, thank you. It's autumn, it's a time we start to look for all of the things we put off because it was hot. And one of the things we need to do is kind of see what the community looks like, what the world looks like. And one of the things we forget is that we live in a desert and we have neighbors. So today we've asked Dave Pearson from ASU to tell us, and our neighbor, to tell us about what's going on with the wildlife in our community. Dave, where'd you go? Here he comes. Give him a hand, please. Hey. I got him.
You hear that every morning. Curveville thrasher. I have some lists up here if anybody's interested. We found over 100 species already here on if you include the park and the canal next door. So it's a really good place. We also start some bird walks starting October, the first Monday of each month. We'll have bird walks to go around, and maybe we'll add some more species. We're still getting some more. I had some more warblers in my front yard this morning, and McGillivrays and Wilsons and orange-crowned warblers. Things are coming through now. It's lots of migration. Anyway, let's talk about wildlife. Now, my wife Nancy probably wouldn't appreciate my calling her the wildlife, but this is actually the first question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out a lot of things, a lot of bits and pieces, and we'll try and put them all together at the end with your questions and your input on what it is about having a green area like this. Is it worth attracting wildlife, or should we just kind of keep it sterile? And what do we exclude? What do we include? How do we decide those kind of things? And who's going to decide? Anybody here tell me what natural means? Who's got a good definition of natural? Where's our microphone runners here? Who's got a good definition of natural? I was told you wouldn't be shy. Okay.
Natural is what nature is.
Okay. What's another definition of natural?
What happens without humankind intervening?
Okay. Both of those are right on the money. But our attitude here in our Judeo-Christian philosophy is we are special. We are something different. We are not part of nature. We are a part, not apart. We're a part of nature. We're different. And we look down on nature as something to be controlled and used. When I work with the Gila River Indian community just south of here, or I work in Thailand, I don't get that. They see us as just a member of the community of nature. And the way things are going, if we don't change our attitude into understanding we are part of this community of species, we aren't separate. Natural needs to include us. So instead of having this kind of definition, existing or caused by nature, not made or caused by humankind, that is a major stumbling block to any type of conserving or seeing a sustainable biodiversity out there. And it's because no habitat in the world can escape the impact of human beings. It's even more important we understand we are part of that community. You've read about what's happening in the Amazon now, burning down. You probably read recently where studies show that we've lost over 3 billion birds, 30% of our birds, since in the last 40 years. Lots of things are happening. And what that means is, instead of talking about pristine environments, we need to look at, we're not going to exclude those environments. We need national parks, we need reserves, but those more and more are going to be isolated islands. And we need to understand that a great part of our biodiversity and our conservation efforts need to be pointed at urban areas, urban ecology, and citizen science, where people who are not scientists are contributing to understanding and gathering data. There's the projected world population. I always like to tell my students in Bio 100, they already see a geezer up there. But when I say, when I was 6 years old, I met the last surviving Union soldier. He was 106, I think. And he talked to me about his grandfather who fought in the Revolutionary War. It just collapses time, and the students kind of blow their minds, saying, God, that guy really is more than a geezer, he's really a grand geezer. But just think about this. What are we leaving that next generation, your grandkids? What are they being left? They're going to probably be facing 12 billion people in the world. And again, when many of you and I were born, there were maybe only 1.8, 2 billion people in the world. Look at the changes that have happened in just these few decades. What is going to be in the future? Now, there are some people like Malthus and Paul Ehrlich who have said, the end of the world is coming, it's going to be completely gone in 15. They did us more a disservice than help because they didn't take technology into account. Short of a nuclear holocaust or the world turning to one great iceberg, it's very likely technology is going to keep on mucking us through, and we're going to keep being able to continue supporting these populations, but in a very, very different way. But we have to understand human beings are one species, and they have to interact as well as we can. I hate to use the word triage, but triage probably is a lot of what's going to be involved. We're not going to be able to save everything, but we need to look at what we can effectively look and save at. 10 largest cities in 1900. Look at London, 6.5 million people. And Philadelphia, barely 1.5 million. That was in 1900. Go to 2015, Tokyo, Yokohama is 38 million people. Sao Paulo didn't even make this list with 21 million people. There are cities on there I've never heard of that have 1 million or 2 million people. The population is not only getting bigger in the world, it's going more and more urban. Velocity of the world's urbanization, in the year 1800, 3% of the world lived in cities. In 1900, 14%. In 1950, 30%. In 2000, 47%. 2008, 50%. 2015, 54%. And now we're guessing by 2050, 3/4 of the people in the world will be living in cities. That makes it even more important that we understand what is about urban areas we can do to maximize the environment around us. And why is that important to us? Is it just aesthetics? Is this just a hobby, or is it something more involved? This is the Earth at night, from the satellites. And look at all the lighted areas. There's a few parts of Africa and North Korea that stand out without much light, but the populations of these cities are expanding more and more and more. And the cities aren't staying in one small area, they're also expanding. And we need to understand there are problems like the urban heat island effect. With all the asphalt and concrete in Phoenix, for instance, when I go out to the Gila River Indian community, out past Wild Horse Pass, you know where that is, Wild Horse Pass? There's a place I know that when I cross that line, and it's just a little ways beyond the hotel, it's like walking through a curtain. The temperature goes down 10 degrees. Just bam, like that. And nothing else is different, except I'm just outside the effects of the urban heat island effect. Now, those are also things important. We know it's there. Are there things we can do to minimize that heat island effect? It's already hot enough here in Phoenix. Do we need to have it even hotter? Also, sorry about the cat lovers here. There are things like this. There are feral cats and domestic cats that are left to run outside, and they kill birds left and right. We estimate more than 2 million birds in the United States alone are killed every year by cats. even when you feed them well. Out at Gilbert Water Ranch, there were a bunch of people feeding the wildcats out there, and they said, if we feed them, they'll stop eating the birds. Nah, it doesn't work that way. They kept on killing the birds. Finally, they published a picture of a cat carrying a blackneck stilt in its mouth, and something was able to be done. But here are the kind of things that are being done around the world right now. Not only to make sure that we've got a better environment and for our own comfort, less of a heat island effect, but these bits and pieces of greenery do spectacularly well in attracting birds and mammals and lizards and other organisms that are able to adapt to the situation. Not all of them can, but some will adapt to the situations. As you see here in parts of Singapore and New York City and Chicago, growing gardens on tops of the buildings, having a lot of vegetation on the buildings, ameliorates a lot of the effects of the accumulation of heat during the day, so that at night the heat island effect doesn't have a chance to take off. Now here are some species we found. These are desert species of birds that are very common right here in our oasis. We've got enough greenery and mature vegetation that it brings a lot of birds. Right now the list of birds, as I said before, is over 100 species just for here. And I'm seeing new ones still fairly regularly as they get out more and more. Anybody recognize this one? Northern mockingbird, very common. Here's another one that's really common. Ding, 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 all morning long. This is the Abert's towhee. Runs around like a rat. And the Gila woodpecker. Makes holes in the saguaros. We know people from out of town when they say Gila woodpecker. Don't say Gila woodpecker. Okay. Yeah, Gila woodpecker, Gila woodpecker. And right on the canal, we're getting a bird that 20 years ago was extremely rare in Arizona. You would have had all the bird watchers in Arizona, Phoenix, coming to see this bird if we found it 20 years ago. This is the olivaceous or neotropic cormorant. And it's very common, flying over, and it'll sit on the canal, sit on the walls. It's in our lakes, golf course lakes. It's getting the fish that are around and doing quite well. Here's another bird, the Anna's hummingbird. It's a common hummingbird all year long. 30 years ago, this bird wasn't even here. It's only come in the last 30 years. It's become very common. And we think a lot of it, we're waving our arms around because there's a lot of data, but we think it's probably due to hummingbird feeders and flowers, many more flowers. And the lesser goldfinch is another very common bird. This is just some of the really common species around here. And all of these species nest right around here. Are feeders good or bad? Okay, who decides? We know that the seed feeders feed a lot of birds. There are some problems when you bring in birds, concentrate them, they can pass diseases much more readily onto each other, and there are diseases amongst the house finches that are caught at these feeders. Also, the big problem here at Friendship Village is these seed feeders also bring in those flying rats, those pigeons. Hummingbird feeders, we've had 3 or 4 species of hummingbirds already at our feeders this summer, and there are more probably coming through, but that's another effective way. By the way, not only hummingbirds come to the hummingbird feeders. The Gila woodpecker loves it, the finches come, the verdins come, lots of birds come to get that, the sweet water there. So again, we have pros and cons and all these attributes of trying to enhance our environment to bring and attract more birds. And the justification is we're losing so much land outside over and around the Phoenix area as it builds up. Don't we have a right to kind of supplement what we've destroyed? Don't we have a right to kind of build up and supply food that was otherwise there that's no longer there? Again, those are the arguments back and forth on how much we can do and what we can do. And is it worth it to have those pigeons coming in if we're feeding some of the seed-eating birds? Again, those are questions that we need to look at and address and see how do we react to them. Then we have a whole set of birds that are here in the winter. This is really common. This is the yellow-rumped warbler, very common all winter long. And we have a peregrine falcon that sits up on the top of the hospital antenna and comes zooming over to catch our pigeons. And I think it's a female. It's pretty large, last year at least. But again, how is it a peregrine falcon can adapt to an urban area? What are all these birds that are apparently coming in and doing well in urban areas? How is it they're pre-adapted? There are really closely related species to every one of these that doesn't come near the city. So there's a canyon towhee that's related to the Abert's towhee. It doesn't come near the city. There's a Costas hummingbird related to Anna's hummingbird. It doesn't come near the city. Some species seem to be pre-adapted for doing well. We're not quite sure, is it their immune system? Is their ability to stand sounds? What is it? We're not sure what it is that it makes some birds so amenable to adapting. And it doesn't take much for us to supply a few trees, bushes, some cover, not necessarily food, but those kind of things. It's all we need, and they can do quite well. This is another bird I see here, not commonly, but regularly, right in the park in back of our house, the vermilion flycatcher. And the western bluebird shows up in the winter as well. So we got all these birds coming here in the winter to use this oasis of Friendship Village as a place to spend the winter. How did they choose it? Would they have chosen it if we didn't have as many trees and greenery as we have? It's hard to say, but I doubt we'd have as much if we didn't have as much vegetation around. And then we have some summer nesting birds, which brings up some problems too. This hooded oriole nested right outside our house, and its nest is on the bottom of the palm tree leaves. It hangs the nest from the bottom of the palm tree leaves. And I talked to Richard, and I said, Richard, please don't prune this palm tree. And he said, okay. He understood. It was really, unfortunately, the message didn't get through to the pruners. And right in the middle of the nesting cycle, they cut all the palms. It was exactly at the same time the young were just coming off the nest. And then we have, if you go to the canal, there are about 60 pairs of cliff swallows who come back up from Argentina. And they need mud. So this year the canal was drained and there's lots of mud over there. What do we do about that? Can we, on really dry years when there's not a mud available, should someone go out there with a hose and make sure that they can get, they come right down, they'll take the kind of clay-like soil, and they then construct their nest under the bridges there. This, by the way, is what used to be called the swallows of Capistrano, which they no longer come to Capistrano. And then we have the white-winged doves, which when we had seed feeders, boy, are they big, so they can really down it. But that's okay. They're a native bird, not like the rock dove. And the white-winged dove is really important. You see the shape of that bill? It's extremely important and highly specialized to pollinate saguaro flowers. It can put its bill right down there and get the nectar, and it gets pollen spread all over its head, and then to the next flower it goes, it spreads the pollen. Plants, you know, have a real problem when it comes to sex. Can I talk about that here? You get the male plants over there and the female plants over there, and they can't get together for sex. So they have to have a menage a trois. They have to have a third party come in, and a pollinator has to spread the pollen between them. And so the white-winged dove is very effective. But then when the fruits come out of the flower, it's also a major seed disperser. It eats those fruits, and when it poops, am I allowed to say poop? Yeah. When it poops miles away, it's dispersed the seeds. So very, very effective. White-winged doves appear about April 15th, and they disappear on September 3rd. Just almost like clockwork. It's changing a little bit now. We're seeing more and more of them spend the winter, but they head down to Mexico just before the hunting season starts. Do you think they know the hunting season when it starts? Or did the game and fish actually fool the hunters and make sure that the hunting season started after the white-winged doves left? Then we have a bunch of migratory birds. As I said, a lot of warblers and tanagers coming through, and they are mostly nocturnal migrants coming through at night. And wherever there's a place at morning time when they have to stop because there's so many predators around, they stop and rest and try and refuel, get some food, and they'll use any kind of bushes. Also on the canal, we have the black-necked stilt. Anybody know why they stand on one leg? If they pulled it up, they'd fall over. Yeah, this is a Preble joke. This is a Preble joke. Yeah, I actually found a dead stilt once. I took it home, and you know what I had when I got home? I had a rumpled stilt skin. I've had my students throw marshmallows at me. I don't know why they get no respect at all. And then we have another bird who's become more and more urbanized. Even though it's a migratory bird, we're finding it's becoming more and more urbanized. It's the Cooper's hawk. And this is right out my back window, our back window of the house. It nailed a pigeon, and it's doing quite a good job. This is a young one, but it learned to sit right above an area where the pigeons were roosting and would come and nail one every day. It's doing a really good job. In Tucson, this bird has become so urbanized, it's picking on the little Inca doves, and it's apparently wiped out the population of Inca doves in Tucson because it's so common now. So there are always trade-offs here involved. And turkey vultures are moving over. They're coming over right now. We just had a talk out of Boyce Thompson yesterday on the Bye-Bye Buzzards Day. Don't call them a buzzard, it's a turkey vulture, okay? And again, they're very, very important, trying to understand what's going on with them. By the way, did you hear about the turkey vulture who got in the airplane with no checked baggage? It only had carry-on. Okay, enough. Okay, I'll stop. So that's just kind of a sampling of how much is coming through here, what's going on, different seasons, and it's exciting. Every season has got a lot of different things to offer. We also have several lizards here, and on the top one there is the ornate tree lizard, which, as long as we don't have cats running around here wild, the lizards will do well. The lizards get wiped out by the cats very, very quickly. So I don't know what your feeling about cats are, but I have a real strong feeling cats belong indoors. The one on the bottom is actually an introduced species called the Mediterranean gecko. And it was brought in to help control insects. So what we find around our house is around our lights at night. And actually, they've come inside. We have to be careful where we step at night because the little ones are scuttling all over the place. But they're very effective at controlling insects and spiders and other things that you might not want inside your house. They were introduced, they are Mediterranean, they're introduced there. They have a really, at night you can hear them go, they have a little clicking song they make. And the larger ones are all white, they can actually change color. So we've got these right here at Friendship Village. We don't have many other lizards or snakes here, but those are two that are quite common. And again, it depends, especially the top one, what we do, what we're able and willing to do with our own pets as far as making sure that population doesn't go down. We used to have a lot of jackrabbits. When I first arrived here, we could see 10 or 15 jackrabbits around here, black-tailed jackrabbits. They disappeared. I hadn't been told the whole story, but I was told by somebody who knew that there was some concern they would attract coyotes, so that they may have had some help in being removed. Then the gray fox. We've had gray foxes here for several years, and several of our colleagues and friends here at Friendship Village didn't like that. They were afraid for their dogs, they were afraid for other things. Again, these are all trade-offs. So a few people complained, and that was enough to have however, the administration say, okay, if you want it, we're going to get rid of all the gray foxes. So they've been removed. If gray foxes come back, please don't talk about it. The gray fox, when it was there, they're able to climb trees. They don't leap tall buildings with a single bound, but they're able to climb trees. And it would come up on our roof and spend the day daytime resting top of our roof, and then come down at night, and it was around. Now, some of the trade-offs here are they are very effective at controlling rats. So any of the places, there are many places here in the Phoenix area that have a lot of trouble with roof rats. And these foxes are very effective at keeping those down. They're also very good at keeping feral cats down too, but we won't talk about that. It's a very small fox, but quite agile. Again, do we have a right to let a few people say what is going on? Does a minority, with a good argument, I mean, they also say, well, maybe they'll carry rabies. There's all kinds of things that have to be involved. It's not an easy decision. It's not an easy decision. And we have to look at, try and be as unemotional about understanding what are the trade-offs. There's always pros and cons. Do we take a little bit of a chance to have this kind of thing here right on our doorsteps at night? Then there are things like butterfly gardens, and lots of native plants, native flowers will attract butterflies. Citrus will attract different types of butterflies. I always kid my friends who are talking about the importance of native flowers, and that's really important. But the one flower that attracts the most butterflies is lantana, which is not a native. And lantana, just spectacular. I've had 15 different species of butterflies coming to lantana, including giant swallowtails and checker spots. So we've got a good list of butterflies for the area as well, looking around, getting different types of plants. Some butterflies are highly specialized in the kind of plants they'll come to. The monarch butterfly only comes to milkweed. And they're extremely important for pollinating milkweed. We've got several milkweed plants planted around our houses here. And occasionally we'll see these migrating monarchs stop by. They're mostly queens, they're related species. Monarchs are very endangered because their wintering sites are being destroyed in Mexico and in California. They migrate thousands of miles to spend winter in millions together in these forests, and they're having a hard time because of the destruction of their habitat. So just planting milkweed, which is a highly specialized plant, what they do is they lay their eggs only on milkweed. The caterpillars come out and they eat the milkweed leaves. No other insect can do that because the milkweed's got all kinds of toxic chemicals to protect itself. But the monarch has evolved ways to detoxify those toxins, and that's the only thing it can detoxify. So it's a specialist. So it can eat the plants without being affected, but then it takes the toxins from the plant and puts it into its wings. So it becomes distasteful. And that highly colorful appearance is a way to make sure even a dumb bird can learn, I'll never eat a monarch butterfly again because I threw up. But again, this can be part of our area too. And already the butterflies are here because of all the many, many plantings, but we can enhance that even more very, very easily by what we choose to plant. Then we have some species. This is some species who are very urbanized, so urbanized they can't do well outside urban areas. They become codependent on us and human beings, cockroaches and rats and pigeons. And we found that they have actually accelerated their evolution. Their populations have changed as they become more and more urbanized. One example I like to use is this plant. It's kind of like a dandelion in Europe. And if you look over on the right there, you see a bee. That's the kind of seed. You see the flower? It looks like a dandelion. It produces seeds that are dispersed by the wind. So remember when you used to blow on the dandelion and how many lovers you had or how many boyfriends or girlfriends, whatever it was? Well, in 15 years, because there's so much concrete and asphalt, that plant changed. It evolved into having a seed that instead of being dispersed by the wind is a heavy seed that falls and inserts itself into cracks in the pavement and concrete and grows that way. 15 years to change. That's how spectacular evolution can be on these things. And we're finding lots and lots of things have become, that were pre-adapted, are becoming more adapted to urban areas. For instance, the coyote. In the west, the coyote's quite small and solitary. It goes after fairly small prey. But we find in the east, the coyote has hybridized with wolves and dogs and has evolved in a very different way by hybridization. So it's got dog genes, so it means it's not afraid of human beings. It's not shy. It's got wolf genes, which means it's larger and it hunts in packs, and it goes after the white-tailed deer that have lost all their predators in the east. And you can walk in the middle of Chicago, you can walk in the middle of New York City and see packs of coyotes. Now, I've seen coyotes walking here, not often. I've seen them come here on our campus. And there are people say, oh, no coyotes. And I can understand they can be pretty fearsome. And when they get used to human beings, they can get even more fearsome because they can do a lot of harm to our pets and other things. Again, it's not an easy question of do coyotes have a right to be here. But just think about this, how quickly and fast it's evolved. It's more genetically diverse in the east, hunts in large packs. Its teeth are different. It's much larger. It has a larger territory. It's less shy. That's all happened in a matter of maybe 70 or 80 years. Very, very quickly changed. The organisms around us are adapting, many of them, but not all of them. This is the common robin in Europe, called the blackbird, European blackbird. And we found in 200 years, the blackbird in the cities compared to its neighbors that are not in cities is not shy, has a larger bill for being able to eat a lot wider range of types of food. It sings louder notes. Anybody guess why it sings louder notes? It's so noisy in the cities to be heard. It has to have louder notes, yes. No longer migratory. And again, it's changed. It's adapted. So we got this whole combination of things of what we can do to attract more birds, more mammals, more reptiles, more butterflies. And we also know that some of them are going to adapt, whether we want to or not, to a very changing environment. Now here's the future. 12 billion people in the world. And here's what the sun corridor is going to look like between Tucson and Phoenix. 30 to 40 million people living between Tucson and Phoenix. And some people extend it from Sierra Vista all the way up to Sedona. That's going to happen very quickly. Anybody ever been to Maricopa? You know the town of Maricopa? If you were there 10 years ago, can you imagine the difference what's happened in Maricopa in 10 years? See that big space there? Anybody know what that big space is between Phoenix and Tucson? Up there right south of Phoenix where there's nothing? Gila River Indian Community, yes. And they are actually quite proud of the fact is they are going to be a holdout. They're going to be the big oasis. They're going to be what's left after everything is built up. And again, it's going to serve, they see it serving as a refuge for things to come there and be able to go out from there back and forth. And they're very proud of that. That's part of their environment. And we're working with them to enhance that capability to have lots of different environments that will anticipate. And that's a big clue too. We can't just sit back and react to things. We need to try to anticipate. We can't completely predict the future, but we can get a good idea of what's going on in the future and try to anticipate what is going to be there and how can we best modify our lives and our habitats and environments around us to maximize the chances for environment and conservation in the future. So here, if you're a geologist, you understand now we've moved out of the Holocene. That started 10,000 years ago. And around the Industrial Revolution time in the early 1900s, late 1800s, now geologists are saying we have moved into what's called the Anthropocene. Anthro being human. Human beings now have such a great impact on every habitat in the world that we can't get away from it. And the Anthropocene is something that we need to understand. We are part of this. We aren't sitting back here looking down on it. We are involved with it. We're one of the species, the many species involved, as part of the overall community of species. So, this starts to lead to these questions now. You've got lots of bits and pieces, lots of information, and lots of arm waving going on here, but what wildlife should be encouraged to be part of Natural Friendship Village in Tempe? And who decides? Think about that. We'll discuss that here as we go on. And try and figure out for your kids, for your grandkids, for your great-grandkids, what kind of city are we going to leave them? We know most of them are living in the cities. So what will be the future of biodiversity in your city in 2090? We won't be here, but our kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids will be here. What will we have left them? Do we have any responsibility to make sure we are going to maximize their ability to have as much biodiversity around them as possible, to have an environment that's compatible with other organisms and share it with other species and not be the type of species that we've been in the past where we take over and figure we're not part of nature. We control nature. And if that's not enough, a guy named James Lovelock, have you heard of him? Remember Gaia, Prince Gaia? He's a futurist, and he says the Anthropocene is passing already. We're already moving into the Novacene, when cyborgs keep humans as pets. Think about that. It's a little, it's so far out there, it's kind of hard for us to kind of grasp that, but trying to understand where we're going in the future is not something that we just say, no, we can't do anything about it. We can and must do something about it now. And if we wait too long, our kids and grandkids won't have a chance to even have species that they can do something about. Have you seen all these walks that go out on Friday? All these kids going out on Friday, maybe they're just getting out of school, but I think it's more just getting out of school on Fridays, where they're saying climate change is important. Stop being deniers, because it's our future, it's not yours. And you need to do something now. You're being selfish about your own short-term gains when you're not thinking about us and the kids and grandkids and what you're going to leave them. So all of this is involved in understanding Friendship Village as an oasis. It isn't independent of that. We're all part of that, and understanding, again, this question, what wildlife should be encouraged to be part of nature, natural, including human beings at Friendship Village, and what is it that makes some people able to decide and have the power to decide and others not. Okay, now we're going to open up for discussion. And let's hear. We have some microphones to run around here.
I just wonder, what is a cyborg?
A cyborg is artificial intelligence. Okay.
Is there a surface that you could put on a concrete balcony that would reduce the heat effect?
There are some surfaces that are harder to maintain clean. It's harder to clean them, but they're lighter colored, and they're more like felt, so they don't absorb as much sun. And they're just developing those, so there are some.
Yeah, I was wondering if it's really possible for one of these foxes to take a dog, or if it would even try.
That's hard to say. Probably a really small Chihuahua, but this is a very small fox, so it's going to be. It would be kind of hard for it to take any dog much more than a poodle size, I'd say.
We hear a lot about the damage that cats supposedly do with birds, but we don't hear much at all of the damage that man-made things do to birds, like wind turbines. How many millions of birds are killed by the wind turbines every year?
Wind turbines are getting better, but you're right, the one I didn't mention, the big killer of migratory birds, because they're nocturnal migrants and they're attracted by lights, are big skyscrapers. They're killing millions of birds as well. So it's not, yeah, you're right, it's not just cats. There are lots and lots of contributors to the downfall of the third or fourth of all the birds in the world. But the skyscrapers, the hard one for wind turbines are the soaring birds like eagles and hawks. But now they're making the turbines with much larger propellers that go slower, and things are a little bit better in that way.
I have a question about the lantana.
Oh, there you are.
There is a very small, low-growing lavender one that I always considered a native. Is that not true?
Well, it's native somewhere, but... And by the way, we found that lantana will change color depending on what kind of irrigation it gets and what kind of nutrients it gets. We started out with a bunch of I think it was yellow ones, and they're all orange now.
You didn't mention owls. And my daughter had a small dog. It was outside, but in a walled yard, and they never found it. And they think an owl got it.
Yeah,
Would that be possible?
We have great horned owls here, yes. We have one that hoots in our big mesquite tree right in the back of our yard and wakes us up some evenings. And yes, they can take things up to the size of a skunk. Not a big dog, but they could take things. So again, those are trade-offs. Shall we say because there's a danger of your dog being taken by a great horned owl, we should have no great horned owls here? We can sterilize the area until, as much as we want, we're going to lose a lot of things, but there are always going to be trade-offs.
This has to do more with foliage. I've thought for some time that it was nuts for us to have as much grass and that kind of thing that needs irrigation and that sort of thing here in the village. But I've talked with a friend who said, if we make everything gravel, we contribute to the heat island effect.
There it depends on how compact the gravel is, but it's a trade-off again. How much water can we afford to use? Again, as the population going up to 30 or 40 million people, water is going to be the big thing. It's going to be the really big thing. Are there other things that we can grow that don't take as much water as grass that could also maybe help ameliorate the heat island effect? Those are possibilities we need to look into too. I know that we got rid of the grass around our house right away, but the gravel's it's not like concrete, it's not like pavement. So it's not exactly the same thing. You look at the physics of it, but the grass is very effective at making sure we're not reflecting as much, or reflecting more light, not absorbing it, and keeping it overnight. But think about the water it takes. So again, these are trade-offs. No answer is going to be black and white. It's going to be you have to balance the pros and the cons of each one of these things.
When you talked about the migratory birds, you didn't mention the martin, which is very popular in the Midwest. And I don't know whether there's any martins around Arizona or not, but they are a fun bird to watch.
It's a strange thing. The purple martins back east come to houses. So you build houses and you get a whole colony of purple martins. Here in the West, they are in Arizona. They nest here in Arizona, but they nest in saguaros. And no one has been able to attract them to houses here in the West. So they're much more scattered out in more natural habitats, but they are here. And it's not a common bird, but it's fairly regular, especially in the desert.
I used to see quail in the families. I haven't seen them recently.
No, I haven't seen quail for about 5 years here. Yeah, I used to see roadrunners here too. Those are the kind of things that it doesn't take much to, you have a population, a pioneer population moving in, and if you have cats or coyotes or something else, you can wipe them out very quickly. It's very small populations.
I saw a roadrunner the other night. Are they out at night?
Not at night very much, but if there's enough light, they'll come to lights to get insects. They'll come to lights.
Yeah, it was in the middle of the road when I was coming in one night.
Great. I haven't seen one here for a little while. That's good.
I just want to know if there's a difference between a mourning dove and a dove.
We have on campus here, we have white-winged dove, we have Eurasian collared dove, we have mourning dove and Inca dove.
Because in the morning you can hear the mourning doves talking to each other, and that's why.
Probably the mourning doves do. We have the Inca dove is a real tiny dove that's around here too, and it's got a call to them. It says, "No hope, no hope." and you know why it says no hope? It's the last thing you hear as you die of thirst in the desert.
I have a question about bats eat mosquitoes. Do we have bats here?
You bet we have bats here, in the summer especially. And again, I have people who say, oh no, bats carry rabies, we don't have bats here. Again, those are trade-offs. And as long as you're not handling bats, bats don't come, we don't have vampire bats here. They don't come down and attack you. And they're actually quite good. They've, over many, many, many centuries, many generations, have become fairly immune to rabies and things like that. There are some illnesses, but for the most part, the bats, again, the trade-off, the bats do a lot more good. We've got some really nasty viruses being carried by mosquitoes around here, especially at night. And having bats is just one more level of protection for us. And people who are afraid of bats, I don't have to be afraid of it because they don't get my hair. I don't have to worry about that. But again, it's attitude, understanding by not knowing something, you can be very afraid of it. Even scorpions, you can be afraid of scorpions if you don't understand the things they do, how they operate, and see them as part of the desert as well. I'm not sure all of you would appreciate having scorpions running in your bedrooms at night, but we can kind of partially control those. I don't know of many scorpion problems here. I haven't seen any in 10 years we've been here, but again, those are trade-offs again.
You mentioned skyscrapers were one of the problems. Are there things that we should be thinking about, not only for the area, Maricopa County, but also Friendship Village, in building buildings?
Excellent question. One thing that's been worked out between National Wildlife Federation and Audubon with the skyscrapers and tall buildings, we know when migration occurs, and most of these birds are coming through at night. And what they're getting to do, especially in New York City, is they're getting the skyscrapers to turn off the lights. And it turns out the lights are what's attracting them. So if you've got high buildings and turn off the lights just during the migration period, in maybe April through May and September through October, it does a tremendous amount of good and doesn't really cost a lot. So those are very effective ways to get about it.
I used to live in Tucson, and they put a great effort into getting people to get rid of their lawns and put in xeriscape. Now, does xeriscape still help the heat?
Again, the natural desert, when you compare it to any concrete and pavement, is much, much more effective at reducing the heat island effect. And Tucson's been very effective. Also, they got rid of olive trees. And olive trees cause, they do provide a lot of photosynthesis and vegetation. On the other hand, they also, a lot of people are very allergic to the pollen they put out. So those are also trade-offs in understanding what you plant. Just having any old tree may not be the answer, but being very selective and knowing trees that attract the birds, provide them protection, and also don't make us all sneeze, maybe the way to choose them.
Yeah, Dave, you mentioned that it's the light of the buildings that attract them. Are there particular light frequencies that they're sensitive to or that they would ignore?
That's another good question. Again, they are very attracted to the blue light area and those kind of areas. So we're changing light bulbs now from filament light bulbs to some of the new light bulbs. And unfortunately, a lot of the new light bulbs are high in blue, have lots of blue wavelengths. And again, those are the kind of things we are trying to experiment. In all these arguments, when especially you're dealing with business people, you have to give them an argument that's going to show them economically in the long run, this is the thing to do. Just to say, wave your arm, say it's good for the environment is not really going to be a very effective argument a lot of times. So we're trying to understand how can we look at that and encourage manufacturers to maybe reduce the blue wavelengths and the wavelengths that would attract the birds that way.
I have a wonderful gecko in my bathroom. It's glass. You can see through it. And it comes out at night. Somebody said, well, did you kill it? I said, no. The gecko is my friend.
Great, Doris. That's super. So your bathroom is becoming an environment, and you are one species sharing it in the community of other species.
Dave, you've said there the last part of your sentence down here, and who decides? And we haven't talked about who decides.
I'll let you bring that up. That can get very controversial.
Well, I have to say that the mature trees and the greenness of Friendship Village also attracts human beings.
So human beings are one more species.
You bet.
Is there any value to a cockroach?
Well, and here we're looking at the future again. We're getting away from the question about who decides, but it turns out that, for instance, and I'm not saying we all should be vegetarians, but if you eat cows, one cow, to make a pound of cow, has to eat about 10 pounds of alfalfa to make 1 pound of cow. It's 10% efficiency. Insects can convert almost 30% of what they eat. And in many parts of the world now, insects are becoming more and more a part of our diets, whether you like it or not. And cockroaches are especially good at being able to raise them. So I get the same reaction when I talk about where's the water going to come when we've got 40 million people living between Tucson and Phoenix? Well, we already have new and effective technology in reverse osmosis that's taking sewage water and directly making it into drinking water. And that technology it's spectacular. So again, those are the kind of things that we're going to have to learn. Yeah, it's not the way we used to do it. It's not what I really like, but this is part of the future, looking at things very, very differently. So insects as food, cockroaches as little cows running around, much more effective in using a lot less water, a lot less fertilizer, a lot less of everything else to raise them.
Do you have any savory cockroach recipes to share with us?
Well, I have never eaten a cockroach. I've eaten a lot of other insects. I have not yet eaten a cockroach, so I can't compare them. The dark meat's good, though, I hear.
In some places, I have seen roof gardens. And of course, one of the buildings you showed had lots of gardens. Can a roof garden exist in the heat of an Arizona desert?
It depends on the plants you use. If you're using cactus and ocotillos, they're pre-adapted specifically to be out in the full sunlight. So yes, you're not going to raise orchids and things from back east there, but you can do things, if you choose them carefully, yes, you can have quite successful roof gardens here in Arizona.
Are we avoiding who decides?
I think we are. Who has a suggestion of who's going to decide on what we can have and what we cannot have as far as wildlife here on? A committee, okay.
Where's Cole?
Who has a suggestion? Is it not a problem? Obviously, somebody is deciding. They're already deciding. No gray foxes. And how is it they were able to get whoever's ear they needed to have it done? And would it just take one or two 2 or 3, 4 people, a minority?
I think it boils down to the principle of the squeaking wheel gets the oil.
Either that or Fox News.
I was going to do no more jokes. Y'all heard about the red blood cell?
What's a red blood cell?
Red blood cell in your blood. It fell in love with another red blood cell, but it was all in vain. Okay, who's going to give me some ideas about, seriously, who's going to decide? Are you just going to sit back and wait and let the squeaky wheels get the advantage?
Well, it seems to me when one of these issues come up, someone with expertise like yourself could present the pros and cons and then put it to a vote to the whole community.
Okay, I've talked to a few of the dog owners, and they said, this is not a vote, this is my dog, and it's like my son to me, or my daughter to me. And if there's even a 1% chance that it's going to be impacted by this wildlife, I won't allow it.
This is on. Okay. All right. I just want to assent to that. I think the issue is education and bringing the education to everyone. Most people don't care about foxes and don't know anything about foxes. And I don't know very much either, even though I'm a wildlife advocate. But how to protect your little animal would be a good thing. For instance, if you're worried about owls, they hunt in the morning at sunrise and they hunt at sundown normally. So when you're out with when you go out with your dog, the chances are very low that an owl will approach you at all. But if the dog is all by itself, they just see lunch.
I thought that dogs always had to be on a leash. I didn't know that dogs were allowed to be on their own in the village.
Good point. I very seldomly see dogs off leashes, so.
Well, then how would a dog get eaten by a fox?
I love the question. I love the. There you go.
Several residents have a fenced-in area, either on the back or in the front of their cottages, that has a fence that confines the dog, just like people do in normal neighborhoods. And so, unfortunately, learning to live with the local wildlife says you turn a small dog out by itself, there are threats out there. If you don't like it, don't turn them loose or protect them.
And when I've talked to some of the administrators, they tell me things like dogs are really important because we're competing with other places for new residents. And if we start to make these types of rules, we're going to not come out with a full house around here. So those are also economic factors involved.
Nationally, we hear every once in a while about bees and how important they are and how they're dying out and how it affects our food, etc. Are there some national organizations that we should be very alert to or not, one or the other, about along the lines of what you're saying that might affect us at Friendship Village?
The bees are very important. We're trying to understand, we have a whole department at ASU who's dealing with social insects and talking about the bees and what's happening, and they tell me it's very complex. It's not a single factor. It's not one factor. It's a multitude of factors. And it's making it very, very difficult to try and do things because there's so many factors involved. But you're right, without pollination from the bees, we would be losing a lot of our food. So we have these red fairy dusters in front of our yard, and the bees are all over them. Again, there's a trade-off because you're attracting Africanized bees. Do you really want a hive of Africanized bees over your front door? Again, one more trade-off. We know that pollinators are important, but do we want them in our backyard and a whole hive when we know how testy they can be. They really don't take a lot of pushing around before they can make big problems. Okay. Got one more question here? All right. Frank's got one there.
I really appreciate your coming here today to share with us, because for many of us, at least for me, it has given me a new look to think about. And one of the things that will not be helpful to us is to not have an open mind. Because if our minds are completely closed, good ideas could come along and pass us by. So, you know, we may think that we can't do anything to help the situation, but if we try to have an open mind, we may hear some ideas that will be helpful, and we may hear some ideas that we think are not helpful. We probably will try to stand on the side of the ones we think are helpful and stand against the ones and speak against the ones we think are not. But we can do it in an attitude of civility and hopefully turn things around for the better.
So we teach in Bio 100 ASU that we tend to come to a conclusion and then look for the data to support whatever conclusion we've come to, which causes no few problems. So again, that's the kind of openness that Frank mentioned that we need to have here and understand. People have different values and they have different ways of looking at things, and how can we come to compromises that it's not going to please everybody, but hopefully minimizes any kind of disputes. At any rate, if you want, I've got some field guides, and also if any of you want the whole list of birds, we have some copies up here. Just come up and get them, and you can look at what we've been doing now in the Gila River Indian community. Well, I helped them produce a book on the birds, and they're losing their language. So for the kids in school now, they can go and each picture has the name of the bird in Otam and English as well, and they're using that as a way to help get the kids involved more with their language, which also helps them understand nature around them. So you can look at these as well. So, gracias por todo. Hasta la próxima vez.
Thank you, Dave, for a very interesting presentation and giving us some things to think about. We want to recognize you with this poster which says you were here. And this lovely poster that has been done advertising your appearance here. So thank you, and please join us in 2 weeks for Stuart Hadley from ASU.